Hey, what's up everybody? My name is Ting, and I've been a hardware multi-boxer since 2001 with Dark Age of Camelot. So I've been at it for quite a while, seen the rise and fall of Isboxer and other software multicast tools. My first game was Dark Age of Camelot, if you can believe that, and there was no software at the time, so I had to use a wireless keyboard. Anyway, I'm doing this kind of like in one cut. I'm just going to have like a candid conversation with you. And I also have a awesome treat for the community to show you my build and kind of what I did once they announced the update for input broadcasting software. So just to give you a little background on Isboxer as well as broadcasting software in general. They've obviously come out and banned software multiboxing. And a lot of people don't know this though. I've used Isboxer in other games, and there are DLLs that inject into Isboxer that do automate the gameplay. So from a detection standpoint, Blizzard really can't separate Isboxer from like a DLL that's running within Isboxer. So that's where they've kind of tilted their hat and said, okay, we're just going to go ahead and ban Isboxer because whether it be the Chinese writing their own custom scripts within the program itself, it led to automated gameplay. And I think that's what the biggest takeaway for me was, is they really wanted to stop the automation and not really the multi-boxers, but because it was gray area, they had to do both, right? So as you can see, it says this software is used to support botting and automated gameplay. So that's kind of like a big indication of why they banned it. So going with the hardware multi-boxing is definitely the safer bet. I don't think they're going to reach out and, ban you for hardware multi-boxing. They've been very explicit in stating that it's the software that they're targeting that automates it, not the hardware. So we'll see if this policy changes, but I think we'll be on the safe side, I believe, using the hardware. So I'm going to roll back here and kind of show you the software that I've been using for my box and what I've done basically. So what I do is I use 2 machines to multi-box 5 computers, and I use a thing called hardware pass-through through virtualization, and I'm going to explain that all in the next probably 20 minutes. Hopefully I'm going to try to wrap it around 20 minutes here. And what it does is the VM uses hardware pass-through, so it has its own independent video card and it has its own independent USB controller, and it acts just like a regular hardware machine. However, instead of buying 4 different computers, it's basically one computer that has 4 different VMs that are all hardware driven and not software driven. So the software that I use is called Unraid, and it's a lot like VMware. It's Linux based and it's a lot cheaper. The basic version that I have is $59, and that's what powers the machine. And in fact, I don't think even VMware allows you to do hardware pass-through without buying very specialized NVIDIA video cards that are very expensive. So this is kind of like the one and only option. I've actually stumbled on Unraid through Linus. I think his name is Linus. Yeah, Linus Tech Tips. I'm sure you're well aware of him, seen him on the internet, especially if you've done any hardware builds. And this is the video that I really stumbled upon, which was the 7 gamers 1 CPU video back in 2016. And this is what I lent my build to be like, wow, you could run 7 independent computers off of one piece of hardware. That sounds super exciting. Now, mind you, Linus, when he did it, it was a $30,000 build, obviously big. And you could see on here the PCIe controllers that he had. He had 7 basically slots, and he had to have custom $1,000 water blocks made for the system that would fit into this board. So I kind of lent from this, and then with the new hardware after 2016, with the extra PCI lanes, it really opened the opportunity. So another YouTuber is Multi-Days, and he's been fantastic in supporting the multi-box community. So make sure you drop him a follow as well. And some of his tips, especially this video, helped me out in the later stages of just getting a multi-viewer and a KVM switch and whatnot like that. So definitely check him out. Give him a like. He will appreciate it. I'll appreciate it as well, because I think he's been fabulous for the community. So I guess we'll go ahead and we'll start with the build. I'm basically going to give you an A to Z list of all the hardware and what I use, and obviously the cost with that as well. So I started with just a regular 4U case. As you can see, it's a mining machine, or it was, and it had the capability of holding basically 8 video cards. And there's actually a couple different models that'll do video cards on the side or around here as well. Now my build only uses 4 video cards, so I'm only using about half the case right now. But again, you could put it in any case that you want. I just found it easier in this way to put the risers in there and whatnot. So the motherboard I used was a X570 Aorus Pro, and the biggest thing for me was having enough PCI lanes in order to run my hardware. So the 16X slot, it basically allows you to do what they call bifurcation, which splits a 16X slot into 4X slots for each video card. So you're basically plugging 4 video cards into the one slot. And then it also allows you another 4X slot to put in for the NVMe slot. And that's going to be important later as we discuss the hardware. So just bear in mind that you can do bifurcation. There's a setting on the motherboard that allows you to do that. So this board particularly allows what they call a 4x4. But there's other boards as well that'll do it. As long as the motherboard supports a 4x4 bifurcation, you're good to run multiple video cards out of one slot. So for the CPU that I ran was basically a simple Ryzen. And it was a 6-core 12-thread, which allowed me to do, I believe, 3 cores per VM instance, which was more than enough to run a 1080p potato PC basically version that I was running at. Now, there it is. I think I picked it up for like $160. Obviously, we're in the middle of a chip shortage crisis, so everything that you pay on computer parts is obviously going to be a little bit more. But again, you know, this is just the CPU that I use. You could obviously use a different CPU or a newer one if you could get your hands on one of the newer Ryzens. So, and then just a CPU cooler. Again, I'm a fan of the Nocturas, so that's what I picked up for the CPU. And then the video cards. Video cards are going to be hard to come by, obviously, because of the Bitcoin, or not the Bitcoin, but Ethereum mining that's going on right now. So the nice thing with my build is you don't need the same video card. You could use multiple different ones. I obviously, using the same is a little bit easier for setup and whatnot. And the big thing that I looked for in finding it in a video card was basically the TDP, which is the amount of power it draws, because I didn't need a big beefy video card obviously to power the potato PCs. So something with 150 watt TDP, and I would say at 60 frames per second it may draw 60-70 watts at most per machine. So that was one of the big considerations that I had in picking a video card. But again, if you just go through some benchmarks, any decent card that runs 1080p will be more than sufficient. So even if you pick like a lesser than the X or the RX 570, you should be fine. And again, just kind of shows you the scalpers out there just trying to scalp these video cards from wherever. Obviously, at the time I paid $100 for the cards, and that was right after the Bitcoin mining crash. So I picked up my hardware up fairly cheap. But I would say if you can get a video card for like $150, you're doing pretty good for a 1080p card. Again, great resources, PC Part Picker. So make sure you just go there, take a look at the hardware. Also look at, the price history. The price history is pretty important too, in judging how much you're overpaying for a card, because you're going to be overpaying, unfortunately, just the way the market is today. That'll eventually drop once the bubble pops, but in the meantime, you're going to be kind of struggling for a card. For the memory, I have 16 gigs per VM, so that's basically 64 gigs. Um, and I think I paid around 230 for mine. So again, another markup on this. Although I did pick up it was on sale, and I think it was the 3600. 3600 or 3200 is pretty good, especially for the AMD. They'd like a little higher bandwidth than the Intels. Here's the power supply that I purchased. I purchased it for like $160. I got it on special again. It was a 1600 watt, obviously way overkill, but at the time of planning my system, I thought of going with the Threadripper route, and I actually scaled it back to 4 because I initially was going to plan on 10, but I wanted to test it with the 4 first before I like jumped up to the 10. But I wanted a power supply that would adapt to more video cards if I wanted to add more later on. So again, like I said, 150 watt TDP on the video cards, which is what, 600 watts, plus the TDP of the CPU, I think, is 65 watts. So, you know, if you have like a 9,000 watt CPU or power supply, you should be more than sufficient to handle that for the box. For the hard drive, I just used a standard SSD card, and I didn't use an NVMe drive. And there's a very specific reason why I chose this SSD drive over an NVMe drive, because I'm going to be using the NVMe slot to split up what they call it USB pass-through. So I'm passing a USB controller through the NVMe slot. So let's see here. So here's the USB controller that I'm using. Now, this took a little bit of research because there are a lot of USB controllers that don't work well with Unraid, and that's kind of why I led with Unraid first. And they don't pass through, or a lot of people have difficulty. This is a tried and true tested card, and it works 100%. So this is the card that you want. The one thing that makes this card so special is it has each controller. So it has a controller for every single VM that could be passed through. Now, what I mean by controller is it has 4 independent controllers. So each controller can be passed to each individual VM. That isn't the case with a lot of other cards that are cheaper than $100. It's basically one controller that's split off into 4 different slots. So here you can see there's basically 4 slots on the back of the card here. And then there's 2 basically splitters on the back. And that'll give you another 4 slots. So you'll have basically 2 USB slots per VM, which is exactly what you need, right? You need a keyboard and a mouse controller. That's it. So I ended up picking up just basically the back panel connections for that card. Just picked up 2 of those. So this is the one card that I bought. This is the riser card, and I'll show you the other riser card I got for the video cards, because that's like what basically puts this all together. This is an NVMe riser card to a 4X slot. And if you can see the USB controller here, it's a 4X PCIe Express controller. And that's the riser card that goes with it, that goes in the NVMe slot. And you're probably asking yourself, well, you're only using one PCIe slot on your motherboard. Why don't you just plug it into the other one? Because unfortunately, all the PCIe lanes are directed towards that one slot. So that's why you have to use the NVMe controller, is because 16 of the PCIe lanes are directed into the one slot that are split up into a 4x4 configuration, and then you're only left for a 4X or 4 PCIe lanes through the NVMe controller only, at least on that board. So that's why I have this. I believe I paid like $30 for this riser card, and that was just because it was here and I was able to Amazon Prime it right away. Now they sell the exact same cards, like on eBay, for $5. But the issue is that it's being shipped from China, so you're gonna have to wait a couple weeks to get it. Again, I basically bought 10 USB cords, obviously, for the USB controller. Now, obviously, there's 8, right? There's 8 for the 4 machines that are on that box, and then there's another 2 for my main machine. So that's why I picked up 10 of those. And then HDMI cords, I also picked up 10 of those as well. And I think I only ended up using 5, but I just ended up buying a couple extras just to have them in case they were bad or whatnot. Here's what makes the magic happen. So this is basically a bifurcated riser, a 16x to a 4x4. This is what allows you to do this without having to spend $1,000 on a motherboard like Linus did. This allows you to basically keep the clock timings of the PCIe controller and split it off into multiple video cards. And you can see it's a 16x slot there. And they provide the SAS cables that connect the riser card to the slot, to the 16x slot that goes in your motherboard there. It's $110, so. And then for the switches, I've got the 8-port. I think I paid $35 for this one, but again, they've kind of sold out since then, so you got to kind of struggle. Multi-days, which again helped me picking out this one as well, just because it was cheap and I didn't really need the drivers. There's another controller or USB switch that allows you to, I guess, do the drivers on the machine if you wanted to do some sort of like macro system. Otherwise, with these types of ports on the cards, you have to use basically what they have on board macros keyboard. So it has like the memory on the keyboard in order to do macros or whatnot for your box. And here's the other one, the Amos, basically that allows you to install the drivers basically on the box itself, and it has the pass-through to do that. So what I ended up doing is basically buying a control pad. And I looked at this, and this is how I'm basically running my macros at the moment through the $35 USB synchronizer. And it's able to keep the macros without on board without having to install the software on the machine. So that's kind of what I'm using to control my boxes. But again, you can use a what they call on-the-fly macro keyboard. And again, that's just personal preference at that point. And then this is the 9-channel HDMI multi-viewer that I'm using. I'm actually only using 4 from my main box, or for my alt box. However, I have a couple other boxes that I plug in. It's nice to have the control aspect. You will find cheaper ones. In fact, I was victim to it. I purchased a $50 4x4, or just a 1080p 4 viewer, and I noticed it was very, very blurry. The hardware in there was pretty slow, not very good. It's a little bit more expensive to do this 4K multi-viewer. Now, obviously, you can still do 1080p at high quality as well, and that's what I have it set at. It's very snappy. So, and thank you, Multi-Days, for that. And finally, the actual build cost. So here we have basically the hardware build that I had: $210 for the motherboard, $167 for the CPU. $240 for the memory, hard drive $120, just basic stuff, right? $180 for the power supply. This is like a standard build, right? The big things are the USB controller, which was $100. You got the 2 headers that go into the USB controller, which is another $20. You got the case. I picked up like I said, I picked up the case on like a closeout because at the time they were getting rid of them. They're discounting them. So I actually got that 4X case pretty cheap. But again, you can throw it in any case that you want. As long as you have room. And the SAS cables they give you are pretty long, so you'll have to find a case that works for you. Heatsink and fan, I like a premium one, obviously. Little more expensive than just a standard one. And then the 4 video cards, $100 each. You're not going to find them for $100, unfortunately, today. You're probably going to end up spending a little bit more on those. And then the riser is the same, $110. And then the NVMe controller, you could buy it for $5, or you could try to find one with Prime, but I think they're all sold out. You probably have to wait a couple weeks for those. And then the end is the Unraid software. So in total, $1,757 for the machine that powers 4 independent computers, basically. And that's $439 per machine. If you factor in a video card, 16 gigs of memory per machine, this, you know, a 3-core CPU, you would go over the $439. So it's actually cost effective by using a machine setup like this versus trying to set up potato PCs. And that's what makes this build so awesome and unique. And I had a chance to test it, and it's been running honestly flawlessly since I set it up. So it's been awesome. You've got a couple parables, which are the gamepad that I showed you. Again, that's personal preference. You could buy an on-the-fly keyboard. In fact, please go check out Multi-Day's video. He's got a whole write-up on those as well. And then the multi-viewer, USB cables, you know, HDMI cables, stuff like that. So grand total comes out to $2,100. Now, obviously, this is a lot more than what you would pay Xboxer for. But again, these aren't using your hardware resources on your main machine. This is all off your main machine, and it's almost run just as good as Xboxer, outside of some obviously Windows switching and stuff that we have to deal with. Now I want to show you the actual software. So here's the software that's currently running, and as you can see, I'm running 4 instances of World of Warcraft, and I think I just have standard Windows on them, Windows 10. And the vDisk size is 50 gigs each. And if I go into the settings, I'm just going to show you how I have the logical CPU set up. So I have 3 per VM. The memory I set at 15 gigs. You can see the basically the big part here is the graphics card. Basically, I assign a graphics card to each VM, and then below here I assign the USB controller to each VM here, and that's what allows me to be able to connect to them via hardware. And if I go into the system devices here, this is where the IOMMU groups are set for the setup of passing through the devices. Now, I will do another video on how to actually set all of this up. Just give me a thumbs up if you like the video. I will do another one, and I will do a complete setup. I'll do a teardown and setup of my current machine on how to pass through exactly these controllers and how to get them work. But I wanted to throw this video out there right away saying, hey, listen, there's a better way of doing hardware multiboxing, and it's through this Unraid software. So I hope this obviously has been informative to you, and I want to go ahead and just give you a couple pictures of my actual machine here. So, and it's almost been like a test bench for me. As you can see here, I have basically everything here. I took out the back panel just so I could play around with the USBs in the back. And then you can see the 4 video cards here with the riser cards that are connected. And here's the USB controller. And I actually have just a smaller SSD right now. And then I'll zoom into and you can see here's the PCIe slot for the video cards that are controlled through the SAS controller there, or through the SAS cables. And then you got the USB controller that's plugged into the NVMe slot via the 4X riser card that I purchased there. And that's pretty much it. And then here's another just a picture of the overall system. And you can see the power supply is curved. I didn't make it polished or anything like that. Like I said, it's been very much a test bed for me to play around with, and it works great for me. I've been leveling a 5-box Shaman crew, so I'm very excited for TBC. So anyway, I wanted to get this video out there. That's it. Like I said, if you like this video, give me a thumbs up, and I hope to see you guys in the future. All right. Have a good day.